Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep today, looking at a whole set of sources, but really centered around Susan Cain's book, Quiet. You know, the power of introverts in a world that can't stop talking.
Such an influential book.
Totally. And our mission here is to really get to the heart of introversion, extroversion. Maybe challenge that idea that being loud is always, the goal.
The extrovert ideal, as Cain calls it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe uncover some of the surprising strengths in quieter types.
For sure. It's a lot there.
We've got loads of material, personal stories, history, some pretty interesting science that the sources get into.
Yeah, it's a rich mix.
And to kick us off, there's this one anecdote that, wow, just really stuck with me. It's about Rosa Parks.
Ah, yes. The Montgomery bus incident, 1955.
Right. And when I used to picture her, honestly, I imagined someone, well, maybe really fierce, loud even, someone who could just stare down that whole bus.
It's a common image, I think.
But these accounts, they paint a different picture. Soft-spoken, gentle. She was even seen by some as, timid or shy, but underneath, just this incredible courage.
Yeah, the sources use this phrase, radical humility, combined with quiet fortitude. It really makes you pause, doesn't it?
It does. How can someone be shy and have that kind of courage?
Well, Parks herself sort of addressed it. Her autobiography was called Quiet Strength. It just forces you to look past the surface, question what we think strength looks like.
And maybe what else quiet people are capable of that we just don't see.
Exactly. And the sources argue pretty strongly that where we fall on that introversion-extroversion spectrum, it's fundamental, as defining as anything else about us.
Right. But it's easy to get the terms wrong, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And the research digs deeper than just, are you social or not? Extroverts, for instance.
Yeah. What characterizes them according to this?
They're often described as tackling things quickly, making fast decisions. They're kind of comfortable multitasking, maybe taking more risks. And they're often motivated by rewards. You can see status, money, that kind of thing. They tend to think out loud. Prefer talking over listening.
Not usually laws for words.
Not typically, no. And they can handle conflict pretty well, but maybe struggle a bit if they have to be alone for too long.
Okay, so they're the outward-facing engine, kind of. What about introverts, then, in contrast?
Introverts, well, they're often depicted as working more slowly, more deliberately.
Okay.
They really like to focus, one thing at a time. They can have really powerful concentration. And they're generally less driven by, say, fame and fortune just for their own sake. They can be social, enjoy people, but they need that alone time, properly need it to recharge their energy levels.
Right.
They usually prefer deeper chats with just a few close friends over, big networking events. They tend to listen more than they talk, think things through before speaking, and might actually express themselves better in writing sometime.
And conflict. Small talk.
Not usually their favorite things, no.
Okay, that lays out the differences pretty clearly. But the sources are also really careful about what introversion is not. What's that key thing people miss?
Oh, this is crucial. Introversion is not the same as being a misanthrope, hating people, or wanting to be a hermit.
Right.
Most introverts are perfectly friendly, perfectly engaging. The sources mention E.M. Forster wrote Only Connect, but was definitely introverted.
Wow.
And maybe the biggest one, it's not the same as shyness. Shyness is about the fear of being judged, rejected, humiliated. It feels bad.
Yeah, it's painful.
Exactly. Introversion, though, is just a preference for quieter, less stimulating environments. It's not driven by fear.
That feels like such a critical point.
Yeah.
You could be a shy extrovert, even, or a totally non-shy introvert.
Precisely. Some psychologists see them on different axes altogether, though there's obviously overlap. But understanding that preference versus fear thing, it changes how you see it all.
Definitely. And related to this, though not identical, the sources talk about high sensitivity as a technical term.
Yeah, highly sensitive person, or HSP.
What does that look like?
Well, the sources describe it as just experiencing things more intensely. So beautiful music might feel almost overwhelmingly good.
Okay.
But violence or just harsh surroundings could feel really upsetting, sickening even. Highly sensitive people often have a really strong conscience. And they might remember feeling kind of nervous being watched or evaluated as kids.
And how does that connect to introversion? Is it the same thing?
Not exactly the same, but there's a big overlap. About 70% of highly sensitive people are also introverts.
Oh, interesting.
So you often find this cluster of traits, high sensitivity, strong conscience, getting easily overwhelmed, often in the same person, who also happens to be introverted. It just adds another layer, you know?
Yeah, another layer of complexity to who we are.
Mhm.
Okay, so if introversion is natural, it's a preference, it's got its own characteristics, why does it feel like society is always pushing us the other way, towards being extroverted?
The extrovert ideal.
Where does that come from?
Well, the sources trace it back. Big cultural shift. Like in the 19th century, America had this culture of character. What mattered was integrity, morals, doing good deeds, your inner self.
Right.
But then around the turn of the 20th century, it shifted towards a culture of personality.
Personality, meaning?
Meaning outward charm, charisma, being, bold, entertaining, a mighty likable fellow.
Yeah.
That suddenly became the gold standard.
And figures like Dale Carnegie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Became huge, teaching people how to perform likability, essentially, how to win friends and influence people through outward presentation.
And that ideal, wow, it's still absolutely everywhere, isn't it?
Oh, completely. Think about schools. Classrooms often set up for group work, desks in pods. Research suggests teachers often, maybe unconsciously, see the ideal student as an extrovert.
And then in the workplace.
Open plan offices, constant emphasis on collaboration, people skills, team players.
Right. The pressure to network, promote yourself, be your own brand.
Be comfortable speaking up, being visible, putting yourself out there. Even in fields you'd think were quieter, like science or writing, getting ahead can feel like it depends just as much on how confidently you present yourself.
It sounds exhausting, frankly. And the sources definitely talk about the cost of this, the psychic pain this bias can cause.
Yeah, that's a strong term, but it fits.
Like parents apologizing because their kid is shy, or being told constantly, come out of your shell, which is just an awful thing to say to someone, really.
It really is. It implies something's wrong with the show.
And so many introverted adults, the sources say, still carry those echoes, feeling like they were somehow wrong, inadequate as kids. It could make just choosing a quiet night with a book feel like you're failing somehow.
Yeah, feeling guilty for needing that downtime. And yet, and this is the powerful counter-argument in the sources, we are potentially missing out on so much by valuing one temperament so heavily. Well, think about it. Some of the most amazing ideas, art, inventions, they came from people who tuned into their inner worlds, who worked quietly, often alone.
Right.
The theory of evolution, Van Gogh's sunflowers, the first personal computer, EMC squared, so much classic literature.
Wow.
The sources highlight people like Newton, Einstein, Yeats, Chopin, Orwell, Darwin. Even modern folks like Larry Page at Google or J.K. Rowling, often deeply introverted people.
Their quiet contemplation changed the world.
In ways that pure extroversion maybe couldn't have, which links right into the surprising power of working alone.
Right. The sources tell that great story about Steve Wozniak creating the first Apple computer.
Yeah, the Homebrew Computer Club might have sparked the idea.
But the actual hard graft, the breakthrough design work.
He did that by himself, late at night. In his little cubicle at HP, he called that solitary time the biggest high ever.
Amazing.
And it's not just anecdotes. The sources really dig into the research by K. Anders Ericsson on deliberate practice.
Ah, yes, the 10,000 hours guy. Sort of.
Sort of, yeah. But his key finding was that top-level achievement across tons of fields comes from this intense, focused practice. And crucially, it's most effective when you do it alone.
Why alone?
Because it needs deep concentration, zero distraction. You have to focus on the tasks that are just challenging enough for you. Groups tend to dilute that.
Okay.
His studies, whether it was musicians, chess players, students, the best ones consistently spent way more time practicing or studying solo than the others.
So Wozniak's childhood, just patiently building electronics by himself, fits that perfectly, that dedicated, solitary effort.
Absolutely. And the sources point out lots of highly creative people, Darwin, again, Madeleine L'Engle, the writer, spent a lot of time alone as teenagers.
Not necessarily isolated, but
just quiet time, pursuing their interests deeply, often because they weren't constantly caught up in the group social whirl.
Right. And this quiet strength, it's not just for creating things or thinking deep thoughts. It applies to leadership too, doesn't it?
Yeah, the sources really challenge that idea that the leader has to be the loudest person in the room, the most dominant.
Rosa Parks again.
Exactly. She wasn't seen as a typical leader, more a foot soldier, but her quiet fortitude, her impeccable character, that made her the perfect, unassailable symbol for the busboy cart.
That slogan, "They've messed with the wrong one now." It worked because she wasn't a loud bully. It was about her quiet dignity being unbreakable.
Precisely. And there are other historical examples, like Moses, described as meek, slow of speech.
He relied on his brother Aaron, the more extroverted one, for the public speaking, right?
While Moses himself was the one receiving the divine wisdom, writing it down, or Eleanor Roosevelt,
How so?
often acted as her husband's conscience, found her power not by being a natural politician, but by speaking from deep moral conviction, even when it wasn't popular. That quiet, firm voice.
And even in places you'd expect pure aggression, like finance.
Warren Buffett, classic example the sources use, an introvert, his success, attributed to his solitary thinking, his incredible patience, resisting the herd mentality.
The inner scorecard.
Exactly. He values his own judgment over what the crowd thinks. That let him see warning signs, like during the dot-com crash, that others just missed because they were caught up in the hype.
So his success is down to intellectual persistence, careful thought, controlling temperament.
Qualities really strongly linked with introversion.
Okay, so given all this, the real value of introversion, but also the pressure from the extrovert ideal, how do people actually, navigate all this? The sources have some practical ideas here.
They do. They talk about free traits. It's a term from psychologist Brian Little.
Free traits.
Yeah, the idea that we can act outside our natural temperament. And we do it all the time.
Like an introvert giving a big speech.
Or an extrovert spending hours focused alone on a project. But we usually do this acting out of character, as Little calls it, when it serves our core personal projects. Things we really deeply care about. Our family, a passion, our work, a cause.
So it's possible for an introvert to be a pseudo-extrovert sometimes, if it's important enough.
Exactly.
Right.
It's possible and often necessary. The sources mention Susan Cain's own story of tackling her fear of public speaking.
How does she manage that?
Careful preparation, speaking only about things she was passionate about, using desensitization techniques, even consciously adopting confident body language, kind of faking it till you make it, but for a purpose she believed in.
But stretching yourself like that, it sounds like it must take a toll.
Oh, absolutely. It costs energy. It can feel inauthentic if you do it too much. Can even be physically draining.
So what's the solution?
That's where restorative niches come in. That's the crucial balancing act.
Restorative niches? Like finding places to hide?
Well, sort of. It means carving out spaces and times to get back to your true self. To recharge. Could be a quiet walk, reading, listening to music, closing your office door, whatever works for you. It's about balancing engaging with the world and honoring how you're naturally wired.
That makes sense. The sources also look beyond just individuals and workplaces, right? They mention cultural differences.
Right.
Yeah, they point out that while the U.S. is often seen as super extroverted, many Asian cultures, for example, tend to value introversion more.
And that can cause problems.
Misunderstandings, definitely. Like Asian American students who are comfortable just quietly thinking in class might be seen by Western teachers as, disengaged or lacking conviction.
When really they're just processing differently.
Exactly. The sources argue conviction isn't about how loud you are.
That's a really powerful point. Different communication styles, neither inherently better. What about relationships? Does it matter if you're an introvert dating an extrovert?
Well, the sources suggest what really matters for compatibility isn't so much introversion, extroversion, but whether you're both agreeable, warm, supportive, loving.
And both types can be that.
Absolutely. Introverts might want fewer friends, but the connections they have can be really deep. They focus their social energy more intensely, perhaps.
They share that story of Greg and Emily. He's the extrovert, she's the introvert.
Right. Their big challenge was parties. Greg wanted more. Emily preferred quiet nights.
So how do they figure it out? Did Emily just have to suck it up?
No, not at all. The breakthrough wasn't Emily changing, but Greg agreeing to change the format of the parties. Instead of one big, potentially overwhelming mob, they created smaller, separate conversation zones within the party. Little clusters.
So Emily could engage more deeply with just a few people at a time.
Exactly, in a way that felt comfortable for her, while Greg still got to have people over. It's about finding ways to meet both needs, respecting the differences, not trying to force someone to be different.
That's smart. And what about parents? If you have a quiet kid, what's the advice?
Yeah.
Especially moving away from that old pressure to fix them.
Oh, the main message is acceptance. Just accept your quiet child for who they are.
Don't try and force them into an extrovert mold.
Please don't. Instead, maybe help them navigate tricky social situations gently. gradually, like small steps, desensitization. And maybe most importantly, encourage their passions, whatever they are, reading, building, writing, even something solitary like drumming. There's a story about a boy named David Wise who did that.
And pursuing those deep interests.
Builds huge confidence. It can lead to a really rich, fulfilling life, even if those interests aren't the most social things, according to their peers at the time.
Yeah, the sources talk about these redemptive life stories for introverts. How finding meaning often involves looking back at overcoming those social hurdles from when they were younger.
Right, those awkward moments, the Charlie Brown moments, as Cain calls them. Maybe they're the price you pay for developing that ability to focus deeply, to pursue passions later on.
So, okay, as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what are the really essential things the sources want us to take away from all this?
I think primarily it's that introversion is, well, it's normal, it's natural, it's valuable. It's fundamentally different from being shy or just not liking people.
Right. And even though our society often seems built for extroverts,
right, introverts bring absolutely crucial strengths. Deep thinking, concentration, persistence, that ability to work powerfully alone. Things we desperately need for innovation, creativity, solving really tough problems.
And it's also about finding your own balance, isn't it? Using those free traits when you need to for things you really care about.
But always making sure you have those restorative niches, that time and space to recharge and just be authentically you.
It feels like an invitation, really, for you, the listener, to maybe reflect on your own temperament. How do you operate?
Yeah, how can you appreciate your own style more? Leverage it. And maybe just as vital, how can you better understand the introverts or extroverts around you? Your colleagues, friends, partner, kids.
Which brings us to that final thought from the sources, the one that really lingers.
That appearance isn't always reality.
Yeah, that quiet person at work, the soft-spoken friend, the child who seems timid.
Their calm exterior, their quiet voice, it might be hiding this incredibly rich, powerful inner world. They could be busy solving problems, creating amazing things, thinking deeply right there beside you.
And maybe real power isn't about having all the power, but just using, well, the kind of temperament you happen to have.
Using your own quiet strength.